This is Independent Voice, and I am Mamme. Welcome, or welcome back. This video is a deeper dive into Mr. FOUAD's biography, where he talks about how eager he was to return to Ethiopia many years later, what his experience was like, the good and the bad, while he was working as a head of missions for humanitarian organizations. Once again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's get to it.
As we were going between Eritrea, Ethiopia, Somalia, North Kenya, because there are Somalis over there with a lot of refugee camps, there was also the South Sudan problem. These experiences that came on the job, you know, it was not something I planned. It was not something I was looking forward to encounter. You know, the nature of the work makes it that you have to go and see when there is turmoil somewhere, okay? Mm-hmm. But once you reach there, what you encounter blows in your face, you know? Mm-hmm. And that's when you start first strategizing, finding the best solution based on the context in which you find yourself, your negotiation with people. And again, here, I must say, maybe it will be delicate, but going back to Ethiopia was something I was looking forward to because I was missing my motherland, you know, apart from the job itself, you know. So of course it was emotional at the beginning, but very quickly it also became a nightmare, you know? Because while all this was unfolding, Dad, who used to work in Khartoum since Haile Selassie's period and through the regime of Mengistu, because of the training he had that I explained to you, trained by the Mossad, the work he was doing in Khartoum was against the TPLF, the ELF, the EDU, and all those opposition groups that were based in Sudan.
Oh, wow.
Okay? Mm-hmm. He knows them more than anyone else. He had infiltrated them. They were fighting verbally. They were fighting by all means. Some of them that he could convince in those days, he was bringing them back home. Wow. You know, and that was the way that their job was done. That was his job, actually. Okay. So when Mengistu was ousted from Ethiopia, and the coalition EPRDF took power, he was their enemy number one.
Oh, wow.
You see? So before they came into Addis, he had an incident in Khartoum because he was so good at what he was doing. It's not the part of the story that I know very well because I was not with him, but what I was told later is that because Sudan was sheltering all this opposition group, but logically they are also enemy of Ethiopia, even if there were technically is. Even if there were bridges that each time were built and reconciliation and what have you, to which he was also contributing, at some point they wanted to eliminate him.
Wow.
And he was set up, and Khartoum is where the two Niles encounter. So Khartoum city is divided into three.
Okay.
So you have Khartoum Omdurman, Khartoum Bahrain, and Khartoum proper. Okay. Most of the diplomats are in Khartoum proper. Okay. Omdurman is the old Khartoum, and Khartoum Bahrain is the industrial zone. Okay. Most of the refugees or opposition groups were in Omdurman. Okay. So he was he was crazy. He was fearless, and he used to go to Omdurman to meet them. And at any time they could have killed him, even if he's a diplomat. Because when a country hosts you as a refugee or as a guest, it means that he accepts your cause. You see? So they have the obligation of protecting diplomats, but if the diplomat goes to his enemies, then he's taking his own risk, So I think he was going for a meeting in Omdurman, and the bridge was closed. In a country, if the bridge is closed, the government is involved, or at least the police is involved. Okay. So he found himself on the bridge alone.
Oh, wow.
In his car. And then there were two trucks from each side that came and bumped him, crushed him, and the drivers just walk away. And I don't know how the police and the ambulance were alerted. When they came to see what happened, his car was completely crushed from in front and from the back. But I think God was with him that time. In the middle, he didn't have anything,
Wow.
a little bit his knee, and then a little bit of crash here, and they took him to the hospital, and he survived.
Wow.
So the animosity was at that level. I'm giving you this example, which is now an old history, and they can hear it if they want. I don't mind. The thing is, the animosity was at that level. Okay? So when they came to power, there are many ambassadors that they asked that they leave. So many went to the States or Europe or something, and some were called in. And he was among those who were called in.
Okay.
And he said no. Because he knows.
He knows what his fate is about to be, right? Wow.
He knew. So in those days, after that accident happened to him, of course, the Ethiopian regime brought him back to Ethiopia and then nominated him as ambassador in Tripoli, in Libya.
Okay.
So he was there when the new regime came. Okay. And that's when they called him in, and he said no, and he went into exile.
Wow.
Okay.
The new regime being which one?
EPRDF.
EPRDF. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because it is those he was fighting with who became the leaders of the country.
Okay. That makes sense.
Voila. You see? And one day, if we have time, we can talk about all the things he did while he was in Khartoum. It's another history by itself,
But
So he went into exile, first to Egypt and then to Saudi Arabia.
yeah.
And while I was working in Djibouti, we met once because I was going to Jeddah to buy cars for the mission.
Okay.
And because I knew he was there, we made appointment in Jeddah. He was in Riyadh. He came to Jeddah. And we were seeing each other after so many years as well.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah. So he was quite happy. I was also happy. And yeah, it was short, 5 days, but we had a catch-up session, and of course he was proud of what I was doing. And when we were separating, and I was going back to Djibouti, he was going back to Riyadh. One thing he told me in those days was, I know you became an adult. I know you have big responsibilities, but if you intend to go to Ethiopia, do it carefully. I'm not going to tell you not to go. That's your choice. You are your own personality. But I know these people who came to power. They know me very well. We know each other. So they can harm you. And he added, they didn't come for the good of Ethiopia. These people, they will do harm to Ethiopia.
Wow.
You see? And in those days, even if I was grown up, even if I had my university diplomas and I was working in international organizations, his part of the history, I didn't know in depth because I didn't grow up with him, So yeah, I listened him with respect and with care, but it did not resonate with me to the extent that I would be fearing anything or saying, okay, that's his view, and I will do my own analysis and I will see what will happen, So that was the bracket I opened just to explain to you parallelly what was happening while I was going deeper into the humanitarian action. And while in Ethiopia, even if we had opened several centers for the handicapped people, both in the Ethiopian side of before Mengistu and the Tigrayan and Eritrean part, of course, they identify you immediately, because first, I am an Ethiopian. Second, I'm working for an international organization. So we are immediately questioned, not directly, but they will search and do their homework. Once they knew who I was, then started my problems, But my problems were minimal because I was protected by the international rule.
Right.
You see? So what they did was I had made an Explo mission and proposed a project. And of course, when you do an Explo mission, as I told you earlier, for Somaliland, you meet all kinds of people.
Right.
You see, whether they are religious people, militia, women association, youngsters, teachers, everyone. So that you can grasp the context in which you are going to evolve by bringing a project, but also people. You need to know the context so that you can also guarantee their safety. So that Explo mission and project proposal, they interpreted it as a spy document.
Oh, wow.
But everyone knows that they did it purposely concerning me, you know, because this is a habit everywhere. You do your work properly. You do this type of report, you know. It's not a joke. They may fight and kill people and render people handicapped forever in their life, but your team, you don't want them to go through that. You study the thing and you propose something with the security that it requires for your team.
Right.
Voila. And so they interpreted that report that way, and they pronounced me persona non grata.
Oh. Whatever that means.
The persona non grata, it's a Latin word that says this person is undesired in the country.
Wow. Undesired.
Yeah.
What? Wow. Okay.
So I had to leave, and I quit Addis very quickly, and I couldn't go back again, you know. So again, the handicap international people wrote a letter to the government of Ethiopia explaining our modus operandi, how we work, and saying, you know, on the contrary, this guy loves his country, you know. We don't understand why. If there are errors, let's talk about it and heal the problem, but you cannot, by virtue of the international humanitarian law, just pronounce persona non grata a person like this. Yeah. So there were discussions. The president went there and blah, 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 and they lifted the persona non grata status. But after a year, I didn't go for a year.
Wow.
So that was another setback, like what happened in Djibouti when I was presenting my credentials, you know. So I lived it also in my own country, you know. So not only you're saddened of the catastrophic situation that you encountered, the people who were forever handicapped, and without talking about all those that you didn't see who died, you know, and the country's level of development, which was very low in those days, that by itself is so painful. That when your own country, for which you longed to go back and see, and all the excitement that was in you was just shattered by one letter that says you are persona non grata in your own country. I think that was the second time I was wounded very deep inside. In Ethiopian language, we say agar alba homquini. It's like as if I was rejected by my own country. This feeling of not knowing where you belong. You see, in your own country, where you drank the water, you ran on the football fields of your own country, you grew up with the kids in your own country, the air that you had that brought you up, etc., rejecting you, you know, that was the first very, very hard hit, and not only personal but also emotional, you know. And in those days, I was really, really sad, you know. So I used to fly around Ethiopia, but not to Ethiopia. And I was regional coordinator. And that was not paid for by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I paid my studies. Nothing was paid by the Ethiopian government. Never. Initially, it was my dad who was paying for my school, not the government. Outside, it was not a scholarship. I paid for my studies. And yet I wanted to come back home. And yet I wanted to serve my own country, you know. But even then, because of political issues, because of somebody else's work, you by proxy being condemned was very hard to swallow.
To swallow, yeah.
You know, it's impossible to heal from that immediately. You know, you had to work it out, and so yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. We'll get back on this topic. What I'm hearing is the strength of that Ethiopian bond, even after so many different obstacles, so many different traumatic experiences. That bond is still there to want to help your own people, even though your job requires you to do many different things. Aside the job requirement, aside it being a job, obviously there is a desire to want to help your own people because you could relate, you associate, you see the need for humanitarian support. You could see that strength, that pull, that bond in one side. But then you can also see that traumatic experience that we're talking about, that the depth of that disappointment, that hurt, that trauma when you are rejected by your own people, so to speak. These are like two extreme spectrums.
Yes. Not being rejected by your own people, but by a regime. Yes, that is what is painful because the people. I went back. I wanted to go to the Njerabet. I wanted to go everywhere. And when we were doing the Explore mission, we were welcomed by populations in the remotest areas of Ethiopia. I discovered dishes that I never tested in my life in Ethiopia. You know, in Tigray, I went to Shiraro, I think it is called. In the most remote place, and this poor family, very gentle peasants, invited us what they call tello. You know, it's a kind of local dish, and it's a sauce with meat and a kind of bread that they make that you have to put in the sauce and eat, but it's so sweet. So nice, you know. I discovered it and I fell in love with it. And I have never seen it in any Ethiopian restaurant abroad. Never, you see? And I was kind of saying, we have this kind of nice dishes, richnesses, and we don't export them. Why, you know? Voila. The people are welcoming this way, you know? And they will shelter you. They give you whatever they have, you know. Again, it was a problem of regime. It was a problem of ideology. It was a problem of not even my fight. It was the fight of my dad. What do I have to do with that, you know? Hulet different ሰዎች ነን. So that was the absurd part, you know. And I was able to do many things. I came back for that. I was so proud to do that.
Right.
But now when they shuttered it this way, just because of someone else's difference that they had with, then you question, where is the intelligence? Where is the right of me in all this, you know?
So they were seeing you through the lenses of how they saw your dad. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. They are assimilating you to something maybe myself I had rejected in those days, you know, without knowing them. My my question when I was teenage was how that can continue from Haile Selassie to, so, and that was too judgmental from my part, and it was not right. But that was what my feeling was at that moment. Okay. But this time when I came back to Ethiopia, it was coming back to my country.
Right.
Not to the country of my dad. It was my country, in which I grew up alone. Gabash? And that was what they were denying.
Yeah.
On the basis of what, But it didn't last too long because, it was absurd. The institution did its job. I could return, but something was broken there, So for the question you put out there, it's a very crucial question because where you were born, where you grew up, with a given context, cultural context, where you had your childhood friends, where you still have in your nose and in your mind the smells that you were used to, whether it is the shuro or things like that, the coffee smells, even the butter smell of Ethiopia, the buses in which you were traveling, that was sometimes annoying, but you were used to it, the mercatos where we used to go, the people, the kindness of people who were wherever you go, blah, come and eat, come and drink, come and...
The hospitality, yeah.
The hospitality, the culture, it's all that brings you back with really impatience to recover all this and re-experience that, and someone comes and shatters it. It's impossible, And if you say, I will never go back to Ethiopia, that's also impossible because these things are imprinted in you. Even if you are used to Champs-Élysées, you're used to Yves Saint Laurent or Coco Chanel, whatever kind of smell here in France, that one is imprinted from childhood,
Right.
It never goes. Even if you want to wipe it out, it will never go,
Yep.
Well, that bond, that eagerness to go back, first was natural, and second, very much needed by the whole body and mental that is in me, So yes, the bond was there, to answer to your question. Yeah. So after a year, actually, they lifted the persona non grata thing, and I interacted. I was going often for project evaluation, we have our own office there. There were white people there. Once it was a Belgium, and then he was replaced by one Italian lady. Yeah, so I was welcome and I do my evaluation and go, and then, as I told you, it was regional coordinator that I was. So we had expanded to Kenya, then to South Sudan. And then towards 1993, 94, we also had that bloody genocide in Rwanda, and that was another absurd, horrible experience as well, because we had teams there, and what was happening is something that no one's mind can take. No one. you know, uh, the word genocide then made sense, you know. It's not like the one that is proclaimed nowadays in Ethiopia. There it was planned. Everything was ready beforehand. The killing process was pronounced through codes by radios that were already planned. Radio Mille Collines, it was called, you know. And as soon as they pronounced that famous sentence, the cockroaches are out, that's it. Wow. You know, the killing started. Families entirely were cut off. Babies, mothers, grandfathers, husbands, everyone, indiscriminately. And it was wanted and it was planned. And today, whatever be the discourse, everyone was responsible in this. It's not only the Hutus, it's not only the Tutsis, everyone. Because this kind of mass preparation cannot be done under the radar by no means, you know, because the machetes were brought in the country for many years and hidden in storage places through Western countries as well, Belgium and even France and other countries, and the ones that today say they liberated their country, somehow they had interest also of seeing this kind of things happening. Whether they knew what will be the magnitude of the evilness of people in doing what they did, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But the preparation of it, the green light that was given, everyone knew about it. And how international organizations that were there could not see that is also an enigma for me, because it's huge. It's so huge. Today, when you see what is happening in Ethiopia or elsewhere, reports are coming from international organizations of things that no one can know. In the remotest area of a given country. So how a genocide of this magnitude could not be seen by anyone? The question is out there. You know, I'm not condemning anyone. I'm not trying to launch a new debate here, but the question is still there. In my mind, in any case, it's still there. People can come and question me. People can come and try to aggress me. It's not a problem now, but how on earth, in a so developed planet, where you had satellites up there that can see you even going to the toilet, could not see the machetes being hidden in some storage places? Question
Apparently
mark.
somebody knew about it. They just chose not to do anything about it or say anything about it, or they have a hand in it.
You remember the then Secretary General of the UN, Boutros Ghali of Egypt, at least once it had happened, you know, at least he had said officially, and I think you can Google it and find it, he said, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, saying, yes, we're sorry, and we are culprits.
Yep.
Yeah. So it is said. It's not me today launching new concepts. No, it is said. Okay. And when Kofi Annan came, he wanted to reform the whole United Nations. I don't know how far they went after that, but yeah, it was an another terrible experience.
Mhm.
Terrible because, again, you question the same questions. Where is humanity?
Yeah. And I think you also bring up a very important question to underline before we move on, which is how in God's green earth, in such a world that we live in, there is technology that sits somewhere up there that manages or has the capacity to see what all is happening. Things like that can happen without being noticed. And I can't help but think about, and I'm not trying to divert this conversation to something else, but I can't help but think about how in God's name, how in God's green earth, when TPLF was burying all those warfare apparatus, somebody didn't know about it.
That's the same question. Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
one
absolutely.
has to ask question. Like we're hearing stories, or we have heard the last 2, at least 3 years, that an entire tank has been buried. They had put firearms in graves inside churches. To this day, even while we're talking about a peace agreement, I think the majority of the work awaits Ethiopia is finding those locations, like you talked about. People dug out the gold and put in the mine. That's exactly what's happening.
Yes.
They have destroyed all the good, but they had left the evil in the ground, so that now the consequences and the danger awaits for those people that is going to be their job to dig that thing and try to get it out. Because how do you manage to bury an entire tank? What is the consequences of burying or putting an entire oil tank underneath the ground? I mean, so it brings up those interesting questions. It's not that the whole world was completely oblivious to it or didn't know. Somebody knew, but somebody chose not to say anything about it.
Agreed, 100%.
Which is really sad. And it leads to your next thing that says, so where is humanity going?
Yes, absolutely. But you see, it's good that you raised it, but towards the conclusion, these are the points that I will put on the table for the next generation in any case, by elaborating a little bit on these various examples that I'm giving you, to ask to the young generation what they should be doing.
Thanks again for joining us. This is Mame, and this is Independent Voice.